What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Murphy, and welcome to this new segment, Bat Talk. It's our only our second time doing this, and I'm here with a very special guest. This is Mr. Julian Caldow. He's a wonderful art designer, concept illustrator, and he's also probably the person I would say most directly responsible for the look of the Batmobile. Certainly one of them. I mean, he could talk a little bit more about that, but he's credited as the concept illustrator on the Batmobile in the original 1989 Tim Burton Batman film, and he's done a lot of work since then. So we could talk about all sorts of stuff. But Mr. Calder, thank you for being here, first of all.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, so why don't we actually you mentioned just before this that was your Batman was your first art department credit, but you've been in creature effects. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, your life up to that point, what led you into art and visual effects and all that sort of stuff.
When I was at art college, I did a film and TV BA, and I had been preparing to do a film of Angela Carter's Company of Wolves. It's a selection of short stories she did about um, uh, Red Riding Hood, and they coincidentally they did a Neil Jordan was making a film when I was preparing to do my student film with Anton First as the designer. But in having to do that, I had to learn to do makeup effects, and I had did some primitive makeup effects, and from that, I got a job on Aliens because I wrote to a few people, and I met this guy Steve Norrington who directed Blade. Back then, he was an animatronics guy, and he introduced me to Stan Winston, and I got a job on Aliens just as a runner, working for his team, Stan Winston's team. And I was in creature effects for 2 or 3 years, but there were a lot better people than me doing it, and I always wanted to get into the art department. So coincidentally, Neil Jordan then went on to make High Spirits at Shepperton Studios, and that's where I met Anton and showed him my folio. And then he said, "We're making this Batman film next year. We might be able to get you a job on that." So that was
Mhm.
kind of the beginning of my art department um, career.
Yeah, were you always was movies something you said you went to art college? Was movies always something that you wanted to pursue, or was it other
Yes,
stuff at
yeah,
first?
yes. I was lucky that I've heard some of your other interviews. A lot of those people that you've had on were sort of struck from a very early age, particularly in the visual effects sort of side of things, by particular movies. I can remember being 6 and seeing King Kong, the 33 version, and like Ray Harryhausen later on when I was about 10, and was fascinated by the fantasy aspect of film. Up till then, I'd sort of seen Western and historical films, Roman stuff and contemporary, obviously. But when it came into the creature stuff, I was like, well, this is something completely new, and it's just this fantastic world. You can make up worlds, and I
Mhm.
think from about 10, I kind of knew that I wanted to get into movies.
That's great. And so, like obviously, like Aliens shot at Pinewood in London, and then Batman did that. So were you, and are you still sort of just like England based? And
Oh yeah, yes.
yeah.
I'm just outside London, yes. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So is
So
that like when in the beginning were you like I need to get to LA or was there any impetus on that or
yes, I did. I mean, after doing Aliens, I did like I wrote to Jim Cameron and sort of try to sort of get work over there. Um, and I was kind of keen to be LA based, but actually, I'm quite glad that I'm UK based now.
yeah, because of course you ended up not needing to because so much work came over there and
Well, I mean,
I
I
mean,
know we're going. Sorry,
that is oh, you're fine.
sorry, I just had a sound glitch there. No, after it turned out that after Batman, there was not a lot of work here.
Mhm.
But at the moment, I mean, the phone's ringing all the time, so it's
That's
sort of
good.
swings roundabouts. Really, I could have been, you know, I do know people who've like lived all around the world to follow the work. So, but having a family quite soon after Batman, actually, um, it meant that obviously schools and stuff like that were a factor.
Yeah. And so you got the job on Batman. And what can you tell us? First of all, you did Aliens and Batman, which is kind of funny because I've always heard the story that when the Batman crew arrived, they found the alien set still there at Pinewood. Like a lot of the stuff was still there. So that might just be.
Well, I couldn't say about that, but I know on Aliens we shot at a place called Acton Power Station, which was a disused power station outside of London, and we sort of did night shoots on there, and it was this old power station. So all of the stuff in Aliens where they're in the reactor, a lot of that
Mhm.
was dressed obviously with all of their sort of alien architecture,
Mhm.
dressed into Acton Power Station and left there. And when they did Batman, they also did a lot of stuff at Acton as well. So I expect, from my point of view, that's what I remember is that you could see like these little Wayland Yutani stickers everywhere
Yeah.
at Acton Station. And I think very soon after that, the place was demolished.
Yeah, so like when you did Batman, like that's obviously like the most famous thing that you had a hand in was the Batmobile, but that was such a, I mean, obviously it won the Oscar for production design. It's one of the most impressive films I think ever made in terms of production design, in terms of art direction. I mean, you had that Gotham City set, that mammoth at the time $2 million Gotham City set. You had the Batcave. You had all sorts of stuff. Even the stuff that they shot on location was just, amped up and weird and cool and stuff. Uh, what was some of the stuff? What was some of the other stuff that you had a hand in working on that?
Well, it's at the beginning, of the very beginning, I was put on to drawing pictures of the buildings, trying to get the
Hmm.
vibe of Gotham City. But really, I never really got, not at the beginning, being very inexperienced, didn't sort of get that vibe that Anton was looking for. You know, one of his senior art directors was Nigel Phelps, who's now a designer in his own right. And Nigel and Anton were doing the buildings. And my stuff was really a little bit too science fiction, I think. Um, so I think Anton sort of was like, what can we get him to do? And then he just basically just sort of said, well, why don't you have a crack at the Batmobile?
There you
And I
go.
was like, I wasn't going to refuse. so, so I very quickly got onto that because obviously they knew from a pre-production point of view that that was something that we were going to need
Hmm.
probably just a few weeks into the shoot. But it was done very quickly. Um, it was agreed on very quickly and sculpted. It was a process of about um, I guess about 12 weeks, maybe 14 weeks. I mean, I don't know if you can corroborate that with other people, but that's what it seems like. But it's a long time ago. Um, but yes, I was just asked to start illustrating ideas, and of course, back then there weren't very many concept illustrators around, and very few art departments who felt the need to have them on board. You only had people like Joe Johnston doing all of the Star Wars stuff,
Yeah.
Ron Cobb, Sid Mead, people like that. That was all a bit rarefied air. But in this country, there weren't too many concept illustrators. Were Chris Foss. There was Chris Foss, of course, who did stuff for Superman. Um, so there wasn't very many of us. So I think it was like, what can we get him to do? So,
Yeah.
so
And so when
a
we
car.
come to that, sort of, mammoth accomplishment, I'm not I can't necessarily confirm this from all the comics that came back there, but I think it was a pretty original design. I don't know how much you took from the comics, but I think you basically started this phenomenon of having this look of the Batmobile that has sort of been carried on by the Schumacher films and the Snyder films and the animated series and the Arkham and even the comics themselves. This whole like I think you kind of started the look of having this, the cab back here and the sort of long body and the way that it looks like that. And did you have any? I mean, what brought that about? Did you have any experience with cars before that, or was this sort of something totally new?
No, I did have a love of cars and car design, mainly
Mm-hmm.
film design. People like Jerry Anderson doing the Thunderbirds and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always interested in vehicle design, and I've also always been interested in jet technology, from an early age. So there was that sort of already that implanted idea. But as far as the look for the Batmobile was concerned, it was really, I think, came about from the architecture
Mm-hmm.
that Anton and Tim Burton were interested in, which was like the sketches of, there's a guy called Hugh Ferris who drew these amazing pencil sketches of proposed buildings in New York, Chicago, maybe, I'm not sure. But if you look at Hugh Ferris's work, it looks like, it could have been a concept for Batman. And having that sort of 30s sensibility, almost Art Deco sensibility, there was one comic, and I couldn't tell you which comic it was, that had this very long sort of sedan car with this cockpit at the rear with quite a long bonnet, but it had like a bat symbol on the front where the grill would be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something that kind of stayed in my mind because I had been sort of floundering about a style for the car. I had been putting like fin on favorite cars like Ferraris and Mustangs, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think Anton was like, "No, we've got to go a bit more brutal than that."
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of erred towards the land speed record cars that were in
Okay.
the. And there's some beautiful cars made back then. There was a fantastic thing called the Golden Arrow, which was done in this country in the 40s, I think. But we went to the 60s, and there was this amazing car that I'd remembered from Top Trumps when I was a kid, um, called the Green Monster. And there was that car and the Spirit of America, which were two American land speed record cars that sort of competed and keep breaking each other's record. And if you look at the Green Monster, you can see that there is the sort of germ of where the Batmobile sort of ended up
Mm-hmm.
with this um, uh, rocket engine down the middle, the jet engine down the middle, which actually in the Green Monster was an engine from a starfighter jet with the cockpit on one side, and that
Mm-hmm.
led me to do this this jet in the middle and a cockpit on either side. And
Mm-hmm.
if you see my early sketches, I've got these two little cockpits, and but that was kind of nixed because Tim sort of said, "Well, look, we've got a conversation between Batman and Vicky Vale in the
Mm-hmm.
Batmobile." So he did. I don't think he wanted mics or stuff like that. Wanted the two people together, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
acting chemistry. So that was when the decision was made to put this cockpit at the back, sort of in the middle, which is kind of nonsensical when you think of a rocket engine that's going right through the car. But hell, we just thought that it was a better fit. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where that came from. And so we had the Green Monster car, and we had, if you look at those grills down the side of the car, I took that from the Ferrari Testarossa, which was kind of a popular Ferrari at that time. And there's two little gills on the front of the car, and
Mm-hmm.
I took that from the Corvette Stingray, the old Stingray with the twin windows at the back. And actually, the back of the car is also from the Stingray, cross between that and the Volkswagen Beetle. And the cockpit is based on the X-15 experimental jet, which Neil Armstrong um,
Wow.
practice going into space. So if you look at that jet, you go, okay, well that's the cockpit.
That's
So it's
fantastic.
all
Yeah,
it's all stolen. It's all stolen, by people who had a lot more time to design things than we did. So but it all came together.
well, they say good artists borrow and great artists steal. Uh, so yeah, it's become so iconic. And like I said, it's not just that particular Batmobile, but I think that general style, like you said, the long body and it's that jet look has been copied by the subsequent films and by the animated series and everything. So I mean, we talked a little bit about how there's it's a collaboration, but your name comes up when you Google, who designed the
Mm.
'89 Batmobile. I
Yeah.
mean, has it been gratifying for you to see all these sort of inspired looks, in every sort of iteration of Batman come about?
Well, it's no, it's well, it's great. The thing is the character is what's driving the films to keep being made. Is a fascinating character, isn't he? The Bruce Wayne, in the same way that Bond is kind of a quite a dual. He has a duality, doesn't he? He wants to do good, but he's quite prepared to do bad to do good.
Mhm.
So the character moved the thing forward. So it allows different art departments the opportunity to reinvent that car. And
Yeah.
obviously, in each case, it's about what the script requires of the car.
Hmm.
Um, but as exemplified by what I said about the conversation that Vicky Vale and
Hmm.
Batman have to have. So it had to be a certain size and a certain height. As it happens, we got the height wrong because when you closed the top of the cockpit, it was the Batman's ears stuck out. So we had to, if you look in the film, that when he's inside, his ears are actually quite a bit smaller than when he's outside. A
Wow.
little bit
Okay.
camera trickery, well, a bit of camera trickery, and a little bit of me not being very experienced.
Yeah. But you also, of course, the other thing is that you also designed the Batwing. The Batwing is, a fairly straightforward design. It's like make the bat symbol into a plane, right? But was
Yeah,
that
pretty
sort of
much
the
it.
direction you were given, or yeah, basically like anything else happened about as far as how that came about?
Well, I think that once we got the look of the Batmobile down, that
Hmm.
kind of formed what we were going to do with the jet in terms of this sort of technology. So again, we had the grills, and I had gone into London to buy some reference books, and I bought this book about stealth aircraft before we knew what stealth aircraft really looked like. Like the Spirit, the B2 Spirit, and the F111. No, the F17 Nighthawk. Is it? I think it's called the Nighthawk, isn't it? Those hadn't been released to the public yet. No, they were still top secret. So the images in this book of stealth aircraft were all these wild sort of shapes. And I remember there was one particular image of a very circular sort of jet with a point with the cockpit at the front. And I thought to myself, well, it's not a massive stretch from that to just have the bat symbol. And
Oh, okay.
and Anton kind of just responded to that. And I remember having sort of a comic and enlarging a photocopy of that symbol. And I just put a cockpit here and thought, here's the intakes, here's the outtakes. And it kind of, once I'd got there, it just seemed obvious that that's what it should be. I didn't, and I don't really know how much Batwing um, iconography that there was before that. I don't think that there was very
Right. Yeah.
much.
I don't
So
think
it
so. In
was
fact, I think even in the comics, it's still just called the Bat Plane. I think Batwing is sort of very peculiar to that movie and the animated series as well. But
right.
yeah, I think that you kind of created that. So good for you.
Well, a footnote to that. I mean, they've kind of riffed on that in the new Flash movie, um,
Yeah.
and they've done a really nice job of sort of moving that into the sort of like 21st century, if you were.
Mhm.
if you will. Yes, Dan Walker did the stuff on the Flash, and he had the kind of the had the advantage of having, working in the computer, which of course we weren't. I had just had crayons, coloured crayons, Caran d'Ache crayons, and with him, with the Batwing, he managed to create the whole thing, interior, exterior, everything, and you know, with a computer you could look around. I did a sort of a nice three-quarters view
Mhm.
of Batmobile, of the Batwing, so that allowed a lot of other people to sort of figure out the actual uh, technical points of actually getting it into a plan section and elevation, into a model.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, back then the concept illustration needed a lot more to get it to the finishing line, whereas
Mhm.
now I might design something from inside out.
Mhm.
Yeah, the illustration I did, the three quarters, if you look at that, you can see that my cockpit is much, much smaller than the
Mhm.
wings surface.
Yeah.
But of course, again, my inexperience, Anton was saying, well, it has to fly down the street, so it can't be that big. So that's why the
Mhm.
cockpit grew larger, as a to make the
Yeah.
craft smaller.
And of course, the new one in the Flash movie is a much bigger vehicle. It's got like lots of people inside of it. So it's like you said, it's
Yes,
like it depends on what the script is asking for and what you have to
yes,
do.
quite.
And that's yeah. So once that film was over and it had received all the accolades, I mean, you obviously moved on. That was 30, some years ago. You've done
Yeah.
so many films since then. Some recent films include Rogue One, Gravity. You can see some of the films you've done in the back. The thing that's incredibly impressive. What can you tell us just about that? Long journey. What are some of the favorite stuff? What's some of the favorite stuff that you do that people should know that you designed or worked on in the years since? And of course, you also have a wonderful website. You go to crop.com/Julian Caldo and check out a lot of these wonderful designs. But yeah, what are some of your favorites over the years? Favorite films, favorite designs?
Well, I think Casino Royale was one of my favorite
Oh, okay.
jobs. Was a funny thing about that was I met Peter Lamont on Aliens, and I
Hmm.
had wanted to work for him because I was fascinated by the Bond films. I think Bond films was one of the reasons why I wanted to get into film. All of those
Yeah.
crazy Ken Adams
Ken
creations.
Adams. Yeah.
Yeah, the I remember seeing the volcano, the interior of the
Yeah.
volcano, and I was like, how do you even come up with the thought of doing something that crazy?
Yeah.
Um, so, and then Peter Lamont kind of became the he was working for Ken Adams, and then kind of headed the art department after that.
Mhm.
So I'd met him on Aliens, and I knew he was designing the sets for it, and I went to work building a little sort of painted um, motorbike that
Mhm.
fit inside a suitcase, and it was all like little pieces of cardboard on different layers, so you could move the limbs of the front forks out, and the rear wheel and the handlebars came up, and it was kind of 2D but 3D, sort of different levels
Mhm.
of cardboard, and it felt kind of embarrassing because he was looking at it and sort of giggling a little bit, and yeah, what else have you got to show me? Um, what I didn't know is that he had sort of put that in his sort of part of his brain and to remember, and thought I could be of use on Casino Royale. So it did, that little bit of homework did pay dividends. But it was it was one of the nicest things about that was a very, very short interview. I remember bringing my computer in and opening my computer, and I already had a picture there of a still that I made for a short film that I made with a sort of a demolished city and these tanks that were hovering around. And he just said, "When do you want to start?" So I just closed my computer and said, "When do you want me to start?" So, but working for Peter was really really great. I mean, he's such a consummate professional. He never panicking, knew exactly what he wanted to do, how long it was going to take. Obviously, Barbara Broccoli and the producers just trusted him implicitly, and it all just ran really, really smoothly. And he just sort of encouraged me to sort of go off and create these bits and pieces. So I did a lot of little props for that film. There's a suitcase with a dart gun in it, which James Bond gets injected with, um, which made it into the film. That looked really. I was really pleased with how that ended up looking. But then by then, of course, I was using computers, so the discrepancy between my initial concepts and the final thing was much
Yeah.
less.
Well, in terms
But I,
of art, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, but one of the big things that I was doing on that was figuring out the parkour sequence
Oh yeah.
pre-title.
Hmm.
Uh, that Peter had remembered this um, hotel in the Bahamas that hadn't been finished. I think he'd seen it when he was doing Spy Who Loved Me, I think. And he thought that would be a good location for the construction site. So art director Steve Lawrence went out and recce'd it and measured it. And I built it in Lightwave in my computer. And there was a few things I didn't really understand from the measurements, but we figured it out. And I built this 3D construction site, added cranes, girders, a tractor, oil cans, all of these, all this set dressing to this building in 3D. And I did a fly through of the sort of proposed journey of Bond and the bomber going through the building. And the purpose of this was because Martin Campbell, the director, couldn't go to the location to recce it because he was doing publicity for the Zorro sequel.
Hmm.
So when he came to Pinewood, we put on this little, we put this thing on a disc, got a big TV, and showed him this fly through with a bit of music. I think it was from the Bourne Identity, the music. And he just responded really well to it. He said, well, if that's what it looks like, it's really good. And so I think Peter was very grateful for that little exercise just to get that ball rolling.
Yeah.
But that was a good fun thing to do, although I do remember having a few headaches figuring out what the whole building looked like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also just have to ask before I let you go, as a Star Wars fan, and I just have to wonder about Rogue One because also as a production designer or as a someone who works in art direction, I would think that Star Wars would be sort of a dream come true because it's all sort of built from the ground up. It's all sort of imagined, right? It's not like nothing comes from the earth.
Exactly. I
So,
mean, it's certainly a box that I wanted to tick. So yes, I was glad to be involved in that. Um,
mhm.
it was there was a lot of course, by contrast on Batman. I was doing the illustration, the concept illustration, but on something like Star Wars, because as you rightly say, it's all world building. There was about 20 illustrators on that, and you never knew what they were going to be using. So you were just going, "Is that any good?" And I said, "We'll let you know." But a lot more hands on deck on something like that. But and ironically, a lot of the stuff that I'm really really pleased that I did for that wasn't used. But
Mm.
again, you can tell on my website. So,
Okay, go to your website, absolutely. And if there's anything else you want to add, anything like know that I did this or something like that, feel free. But yeah,
no, no, not really. I can think of.
okay.
I just
Well,
as long as the phone keeps ringing, I'm happy. So
yeah, absolutely. Got to keep us working. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure to have Mr. Julian Caldo on the show. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, guys. The Batmobile, it was awesome. Like that's what led us here, and it's such a great thing to talk to someone who has that place in Batman history. So I'm Ryan Murphy, and until next time, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ryan.